You think your worst day is bad? People in the Great Depression did 10 things just to survive it. And number 1 was so desperate, it became a normal habit, ranked from bad to unthinkable. One quick note before we start counting. Numbers 3, 2, and 1 on this list are not like the rest of it. They get worse in ways you will not see coming. Subscribe now, because once this countdown starts, we are not slowing down to remind you. Number 10. The recipes that weren't recipes. People baked something they called mock apple pie. Crackers, sugar, and cinnamon, pretending to be fruit because real apples cost money and crackers didn't. They poured gravy over stale bread and called it dinner. In a lot of houses, that was dinner 3 or 4 nights a week, not a once-in-a-while thing. They picked dandelion leaves out of the yard and put them in a salad because a salad needs something green, even if the something green is a weed growing wild by the fence. Some families kept a few chickens in the backyard if the city allowed it, or canned every vegetable a small garden produced, because winter didn't care whether the harvest had been good. Relief kitchens handed out powdered milk and surplus flour when they could get it, and a family that got both in the same week called that a lucky week. None of this made it into a cookbook because it wasn't a recipe. It was inventory management for a kitchen that had almost nothing left in it, and this is the mildest thing on this list. Number 9. An entire country turned President Herbert Hoover's name into a punchline. People slept under newspapers and called them Hoover blankets. They turned their empty pockets inside out and called them Hoover flags. Cars too broke down to run on gas, got pulled by a mule instead. And people called that a Hoover wagon. Worn through shoe soles got patched with a slice of cardboard. Hoover leather, good until the next rainstorm sent you home walking on wet cardboard instead. People will get one more use out of his name later on this list, riding in something they nicknamed a Hoover Pullman, which was never a train car with actual seats. He didn't cause the 1929 stock market crash. But by 1932, his name was stapled to every symbol of it, whether he liked it or not. Imagine being so unpopular that sleeping under a newspaper gets your name on it. And this is just the small stuff. By the time you get further down this list, his name gets stapled to something a lot bigger than a blanket. Number 8. Kids went to work instead of school. Boys sold newspapers on street corners before sunrise, then went home and did it again after class, if they were still enrolled at all. They shined shoes for a few cents a pair, kneeling on cold sidewalks for hours, hoping for a generous tip that almost never came. Girls, more quietly, dropped out to run the house, watching younger siblings, cooking, cleaning, so their mothers could take in laundry or sewing for pay. A few cents doesn't sound like much. In a family with no income at all, it was the difference between eating and not eating. Nobody kept an exact count, but by the depth of the crisis, hundreds of thousands of children, maybe more since nobody was counting farm work or street corners, were doing this instead of sitting in a classroom. Nobody wrote a headline about it. It just became what childhood was for a while. If you're enjoying how miserable this is, subscribe. It gets worse. Number 7. When there was no work in town, people rode the rails to find it. Riders bitterly nicknamed the ride a Hoover Pullman, a freight car with no seats, no windows, and no ticket required. Hundreds of thousands of people, men, teenagers, some as young as 12, hopped onto moving freight trains with no ticket and no idea where the train was headed, just a rumor that there might be work 2 states over. It was not safe. Falling asleep on top of a moving boxcar in winter could cost you frostbite. Falling asleep underneath one could cost you a limb or your life. Some historians estimate as many as 250,000 young people, some barely teenagers, some in their early 20s, were living this way by 1932, riding from town to town, chasing rumors of work that often weren't true. They left a language behind them anyway, symbols chalked onto fences and doors. A cat meant a kind woman lived there. A wavy line meant clean water. A cross meant it was worth talking religion for a meal. A circle with an X through it meant something different. This house has already said no enough times. At least the people riding the rails looked out for each other. The next one on this list didn't have that luxury. Number 6. Privacy became a luxury nobody could afford. Relatives, and sometimes complete strangers, crowded into a single house just to split the rent. In some cities, it's estimated that one household in 4 was doubling up with another family by the worst years of the crisis. One kitchen, one bathroom, a bed that never stayed empty for long because as soon as one person got up for their shift, somebody else lay down in the same spot to sleep, still warm. Meals ran in shifts too. Whoever got there first ate first, and the rest waited their turn at the same table, watching the pot. Kids slept 3 and 4 to a mattress, feet ahead, so a family that used to need 2 bedrooms could survive on one. Nobody chose their roommates. The rent chose them, and when the rent stopped being enough anyway, the apple sellers showed up. Number 5. An industry group turned unemployment into a sales pitch. Apple growers had a surplus crop and no buyers. So someone had an idea: sell crates of apples to jobless men on credit and let them resell the fruit one at a time. The men stood on street corners and sold each apple for 5 cents. By the end of 1930, thousands of them were doing it on the corners of New York City alone. Other big cities picked up the same scheme within weeks, all with their own corners full of their own men holding crates. Some of those men had been bankers, lawyers, factory foremen. A crate of apples didn't ask what you used to be. It became the unofficial symbol of the entire Depression. A man in a suit that no longer fit him, holding out a single apple, hoping somebody would stop walking. It wasn't a job. It just looked enough like one that a man could tell himself it was. At least the apple seller still had somewhere to go home to at night. A lot of people by this point in the Depression didn't. Number 4. When rent disappeared completely, people built their own towns. Out of scrap wood, flattened tin cans, and cardboard, families built shelters in city parks and empty lots. They were called Hoovervilles, another gift to the president's legacy. And by the early 1930s, they existed in nearly every major American city. New York had one in the middle of Central Park, in a dried-out reservoir bed. Seattle's grew so large it stood for a full decade, with its own unofficial mayor and its own rules. No running water, no plumbing, just a shared fire, shared silence about how anyone ended up there, and a shared understanding that nobody asked. Men who'd had offices a year earlier lived 100 feet from men who'd never had one at all. The camp didn't care about the difference anymore. Some of these camps lasted for years. Nobody was proud of the address. Everybody had one anyway, and the people who ended up there from the cities were the lucky ones. Somewhere else, the ground itself had already turned against people who never left home at all. Before we keep going, this is the point where the list stops being uncomfortable and starts being hard to sit through. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. You're going to want to see exactly how number 1 plays out. Number 3. On the Great Plains, the dirt itself gave up. People started calling it the Dust Bowl, and the name undersold it. Years of drought turned farmland into dust, and the dust didn't stay in the fields. It buried fences, filled houses, and turned midday into midnight for hours at a time. On the worst day of it all, a single afternoon in April 1935 that people just started calling Black Sunday, a wall of dust rolled across 5 states so thick that people 2 rooms apart in the same house couldn't see each other. Families wore cloth masks just to breathe inside their own homes, and doctors started giving a real diagnosis to people who had simply been breathing their own farmland: dust pneumonia, and the banks foreclosed anyway, because dead land still owed money whether it could grow anything or not. An estimated 2.5 million people packed what they could carry and drove west, hoping California had something the dust hadn't taken yet. This is bad. It is not the worst thing on this list. Number 2, when the food ran out, the definition of food got wider. In Texas, so many people hunted armadillos to survive that the animal earned a nickname, the Hoover hog. In cities across the country, people hunted squirrels and pigeons in public parks for the exact same reason rural families were hunting armadillos 5 states away. Out on the plains, gophers and prairie dogs went into the same pot for the same reason. Bones went into that pot for broth long after there was any meat left worth mentioning, because a pot of hot water with something that used to be alive in it still felt like a meal. Even weeds got graded by taste. Dandelion greens again, but also purslane, wild onion, anything growing free at the edge of a lot that hadn't already been picked clean by the family down the street. People joked about all of it, because joking was easier than saying the real word for what this was: starvation, wearing a folksy nickname so it could sit at the dinner table. And that word, starvation, is exactly what pushed some families to the thing at the very top of this list. Number 1, at the worst of the crisis, some parents did something no ranking really prepares you for. They gave their children away, to orphanages, to relatives, to anyone who could feed them when they couldn't. It happened so often that some orphanages reported requests rising month after month through the early 1930s, until they had to turn desperate families down, not because the children weren't wanted, because there was no food and no room left to take another one in. Sometimes it was supposed to be temporary, just a season, until work came back. Sometimes temporary quietly became permanent because the work never did come back for that family. Some parents made the trip themselves, dressed their kids as neatly as they could manage, and waited outside a gate, hoping that looking cared for would count for something. Others simply couldn't afford the trip at all, and sent a child alone on a train to relatives in another state, with a note pinned to a coat and a promise to send for them later. A suitcase by the door, a train pulling away, a parent choosing to go hungry themselves so someone else's kitchen could feed their kid instead. That's the number 1, not because it's the most dramatic thing on this list, because for a while, it was the most common. Maybe the difference between them and us was never really about character. It's about how close to the bottom we've actually had to get. Most of us have never had to find out. Somewhere between a 5-cent apple and a suitcase by the door, an entire country found out exactly how much it could lose and still get up the next morning. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a president's own name turned into a punchline for a decade. Proof that when things get bad enough, people find a way to laugh about it, right up until the moment they can't anymore. Did we rank these wrong? What surprised you the most? Let us know below. And if this was bad, wait until you see what the next hard time has waiting.